Hello YouTubers. So there's this YouTuber, this famous YouTuber, perhaps you've heard of him. His name is Onision. Turns out in the past year he's published 2 books. Both of Onision's books are written in first person, which limits how well we can get to know characters in a story. Using this perspective, a writer has to be careful to not make leaps in logic. In the beginning of the book, Arthur assumes that people lead unexamined lives and are therefore stupid, when he has no way of knowing what other people think about, really. This line of thinking is one of his reasons that he lists why he hates people. But Arthur isn't the only character who makes assumptions. While Arthur is in the principal's office after his first fight, in which he breaks another kid's arm because that kid touched his girlfriend, the principal talks about how religious his parents are, and how that has affected Arthur, as if the principal is reading Arthur's mind. Even if all the fights the principal has ever seen were started by kids with uber-Christian parents, this doesn't necessarily mean that's always going to be the case. Also, in Chapter 7, Arthur travels with his father and his father's girlfriend to his aunt's house. While in the car, Arthur rattles on about how his father's girlfriend, whom we still don't have a name for at this point, loves being more important than her boyfriend's own offspring because she has a smug look on her face. How would he know this based on that alone? People can have smug looks on their face for a variety of reasons. Why would he think it's because of this specifically? In both of Onision's books, the assumptions made seem to be pretty accurate just about every single time, and are never once brought into question. In real life, if someone makes an assumption, it has a 50-50 chance of being wrong. And in a good story, this is something that I believe would have at least been touched on as a possible character flaw. In the introduction and first couple of chapters of Onision's book, Arthur unloads a mind-numbing, hate-filled tirade at the readers that sets a bad tone for the rest of the book. This mindset seems to come and go throughout the book, even until the very end, and he offers only topical reasons why he hates people without offering any life experiences to explain in any real detail just how he became that way. The reasons he does give for hating other people could just as easily apply to himself, and they often do. However, he makes inexplicable exceptions to hating everyone for various girls, including his first girlfriend, Ashley. He tries to pass this off as a mere physical attraction, but even if he's just physically attracted to her and nothing else, he could still hate her for being shallow and leading an unexamined life, and maybe he does, I don't know. Arthur gets into way too many fights at the drop of a hat, including at one point fighting and beating the hell out of a guy who's just sparring with the airmen. Like he's just sparring as part of training. And Arthur comes along and beats this guy senseless for no reason, and actually takes pride in his ability to beat this guy up, which just goes to show that this guy is not really sympathetic. He doesn't really seem to care that much about human life, like he'll just attack someone at the drop of a hat, and that to me that's just not very sympathetic at all. During every fight, Arthur goes into extensive detail about how he disables and hurts his opponents, except for the fight where he takes a guy's eye out. During every other scene, Arthur doesn't bother to elaborate on details except for maybe the bare minimum. During the introduction of and throughout the rest of the book, Onision also engages in a fair amount of breaking of the fourth wall. And this is something that's a bit different from his first book. I don't think in his first book he ever really broke the fourth wall, so I don't know what made him decide to do it here. For those who don't know what breaking the fourth wall means, it occurs in literature, theater, or film when a writer or actor breaks a barrier assumed in works of fiction and acknowledges the reader or audience member, or even makes a reference to the story itself. It is seen far less frequently in works of literature, and is most effectively used in comedy TV shows and films like House of Cards, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Spaceballs. In this book, the author seems to be preaching at the reader more than anything else. It left me feeling increasingly less concerned about what the character had to say, because I felt like he was shoving his twisted ideologies down my throat. In the first chapter, Arthur addresses the reader directly and proclaims that the key to world peace apparently is silence, which it completely isn't. Silence from minority groups actually contributes to the losses of rights, racism, sexism, and even genocide. It's not something that should be encouraged. I hope that the writer, Onision, does not actually mean what he put in Arthur's mouth, and I hope to God no impressionable teenager reading this actually takes it seriously. In chapter 20, after Arthur learns that Corey and Rachel have hooked up, he goes to dinner and goes on this tirade about how humans are different from animals, stating how he hates people who pick on others who were born different, even though from the beginning of the book up until this point, he's described himself in pretty animalistic terms, especially with his descriptions of his sexuality. Also, he never mentioned this specific thing as a reason to hate people, or even alluded to it. You know, this is something that just kind of came out of the blue, really. And as far as the breaking of the fourth wall, it isn't even really necessary here. I don't know why Onision felt the need to use this in his story. I don't know, like, what was the point? It left me feeling kind of confused and a little on the defensive, because when I read a book, I don't like being preached at. And I feel like I said, I feel like some impressionable teenager might get a hold of this and think what this character has to say is worthwhile and something that that is okay to think, and that his behavior is okay, is acceptable behavior. I really hope that nobody who reads this thinks that way. I really hope not. Soon after Arthur starts dating Ashley, towards the beginning of the book, he's blabbering on about his body's physical needs and the human condition, and about how things like love and friendship are illusions. Arthur mentions he has millions of potential human lives screaming within him to impregnate this girl Ashley as soon as humanly possible, which is just freaking creepy to me. He pretty much admits he's with Ashley because he finds her physically attractive, and he thinks she finds him attractive physically and for pretty much no other reason. Like, they don't have any common interests or anything like that. Arthur thinks people don't have free will because the desires of the body apparently trump the workings of the higher brain. Let's temporarily entertain this thought. Let's just say a person is a slave to their body, as Arthur claims. Then all the criticisms that Arthur has made about his dad and his dad's girlfriend are pretty much null and void, because they're slaves to their bodies too in terms of sex and food. So there's really no reason for Arthur to bitch about his father and his father's girlfriend being the way that they are. There's really no reason for that. He's also a hypocrite for wanting to preach his views, but demanding other people be silent. He also complains about his father being self-centered, but shows how self-centered he is by hating his father's girlfriend and sports, the two things in his father's life that have little to do with himself. And he wants people to die, people who are sports fans to die in a massive explosion. But then he kind of takes it back a little bit later and says he's not a sociopath and crap like that. It's just kind of funny, but in a scary way. In chapter 9, he also apparently had to mock his other trainees while they did push-ups, and then he insults them in his journal because he thinks they're just raging animals. Again, he's assuming that they're only thinking about getting back at him for mocking them or something. I don't know if Onision is aware of this or not, but this is like classic jail warden type behavior. There's even a study on this from like the 1970s at Stanford University that shows how people react in apparent positions of strength or weakness. As much as Arthur rails about the other trainees for being brutes, he fails to realize that he is equally brainwashed and the trainers are the puppeteers. As much as he complains that his fellow trainees only focus on what's right in front of them, so does he. He also makes the statement that the world is full of people willing to write you off over nothing, while his own character has apparently done this to others quite a few times, from his father to all of his high school classmates. I mean, it's just crazy how this guy's brain works. It's like he doesn't. Occasionally, he'll have moments of conscious thought where he, I think, kind of realizes, oh yeah, I do this kind of thing too. But those moments are too few and far between.
In Chapter 13, Arthur volunteers to go overseas because he suddenly wants to help people in need for some reason, even though he's shown no motive to do so up until this point. Even after his saving of this digital person in a simulation, he still hates people. At least certain people, like social rejects and people who are fat. He also comments on how the other trainees are cowards trying to get out of being deployed. Didn't Arthur initially go into the military with the idea of just putting in his time and not dying? And in Chapter 16, Arthur does a complete 180 and goes on about how he wanted to just do his time and get out of the military. Wow. What a change of attitude from a guy who was so gung-ho about serving his country 2 chapters ago. In one of the first fight scenes, Arthur learns a guy touched his girlfriend, so he gets revenge on this boy by going to school dressed in a trench coat, breaking the boy's arm, and acting like he had no choice in the matter, which only a psycho would think like that. Apparently, Arthur is somehow not sent home, or at least to the principal's office for the first time he wore the coat. He's also not arrested for beating the kid up, by claiming that he broke the other boy's arm in self-defense. I doubt this story would fly with the cops in real life, but Arthur allowed himself to get beaten up a little by the boy he fought, so as to look like he was only defending himself, which is very manipulative, by the way. Kind of sounds like some wish fulfillment fantasy on the part of the writer. One day at lunch, Ashley sits on Arthur's lap while talking with her friends. Arthur decides he finally has had enough of their chatter and verbally insults his girlfriend's friends. He then leaves and flips the bird at his girlfriend when she calls after him. Then, instead of breaking up with Arthur like any self-respecting girl would, Ashley calls Arthur wanting to know what she can do to make things better between them, and he convinces her to dress up as a goth chick. In Chapter 11, after Arthur enters the military, he meets a girl named Corey who he's partners with on a simulation involving talking someone out of committing suicide, and they become fast friends. Apparently, the character Arthur is very compassionate because he's the only person who passes the simulation, which I totally did not pick up on throughout the whole book. The whole book so far has been about Arthur hating people and wanting to do violent things to them for saying and doing things that annoy him. And now all of a sudden he's compassionate? Really? I think, considering the history of this character, it's more likely that he's a high-functioning sociopath who's capable of acting like he cares about people to a certain extent, except when they push his buttons. In Chapter 15, after Arthur hears from Ashley about her brother's death in a school shooting, he goes home the next day, which seems implausibly fast, and he bangs his ex-girlfriend for a week at her house. Apparently, apart from attending the funeral, that's all they do. No asking what's been going on while the two of them were apart. No eating dinner together at a restaurant or anything. Nope. Just sex, a funeral, and more sex. In Chapter 17, Arthur beats the ass of a fighting instructor brutally for no good reason, and relates how he has this sense of pride and accomplishment from beating a guy bloody and breaking his ankle. In the real world, and in a good novel, a character that did this to another character would get court-martialed and thrown into the brig. He instead gets a slap on the wrist and several sessions of therapy. After this episode, and another in which he takes out the eye of a guy named Austin, he's trained to be a super soldier pretty much, and does very well, apparently. And in Chapter 23, after a dinner together, Arthur gets confronted by a guy, while Corey gets hit in the head by another guy, and Rachel nearly gets raped. Arthur somehow finds them in the girl's room, and kills all but Austin, who somehow manages to kill him with a hatchet, which seems more than a bit unrealistic considering that Arthur stabbed Austin in his good eye before Austin killed him. So Austin would have had to have heard Arthur and hope he didn't kill one of his own friends in the process. Corey reveals at the very end that the real reason Arthur hated his father so much was that the father sexually abused him as a child. Revealing it at this point just makes it an afterthought. Also, I couldn't help but wonder if Arthur was just lying to Corey to get sympathy from her when he told her this. He never bothered to explain it once in his journal, and now we're just supposed to believe this bit of info? I just don't think so. Not because I like Arthur's father or anything, but because I don't trust the character Arthur. It seems like Onision set this up a bit with the therapy sessions after Arthur attacked Martinez, but he's so manipulative and he's flip-flopped from one truth to another so many times that I have to wonder if he didn't just make this up to Corey one night when he was still trying to get into her panties. Plus, he's demonstrated willingness to kill others to get his way, and yet lying is supposed to be beneath him? I just don't buy it. Plus, clearly Corey still had feelings for Arthur, so of course she'd buy into whatever he said. Then she goes into way too much detail about the aftermath of the killings as if it was really necessary. The descriptions of which is all too similar to how Arthur would have described things, which is kind of creepy and unrealistic because if you're talking as a different character, you're supposed to have a slightly different voice. You're supposed to say things a little bit differently. It just comes across as the same person saying the same things. Also, wasn't Corey knocked out during part of the struggle? Wasn't she like unconscious? So, I don't know, maybe Rachel could have filled her in on the parts that she missed. But in my mind, I mean, this last minute reveal doesn't really redeem the character Arthur in any meaningful way. I'm sorry. But all the stuff that he's done to innocent people, he's still just this violent douche nozzle who reaped exactly what he sowed. I mean, there's been people in real life who've struggled with parents abusing them, and they don't turn out this way. They don't. They seek help. They become better people. They just don't turn out like this. And it saddens me that this actually got published. But at the same time, I feel like, there are good writers out there who are independent who might not maybe necessarily get a deal with a publisher, but who could publish independently. And those are the people that should be heard from. Not a YouTuber who's doing this as a way to as like a hobby to supplement his income. Okay? Onision, you don't have any writing style. You can't build decent characters. You contradict yourself way too many times. Your spelling and grammar are atrocious. You don't tell compelling stories. Please don't write anymore. Or if you do, keep it to yourself. See you later, YouTubers. Bye-bye.